What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller from Hook'emHeadlines.com coming back at y'all today with a summer workouts update. I think I've only done one or two of these so far this off season. I'm just talking about some of the progress for the Longhorns during summer workouts. But I wanted to provide like a brief update on some of the new additions to the program, true freshmen, summer enrollees specifically, and then I'll touch on some players that are looking good in 7-on-7. And lastly, look at some players that are still pushing for playing time this summer, as in like players that might be a little bit further down the depth chart, or are really still in this stage of needing to prove themselves stage. And so, I think that's something that's important to note too, as we're a little less than a month out from the start of fall camp. I believe fall camp, the day that players will be reporting is August 2nd. It's August 2nd or August 3rd. That's around the time, I believe last year was like August 3rd. So that lines up. I believe that was Orange Bloods that had reported that. And so, we got, a few weeks until the start of fall camp. So we're really about to kick into gear here. Seems like the offseason's gone by pretty quick for football. But just a lot of exciting stuff. Still a lot of stuff going on in recruiting. But like I said, there's a couple of topics that I want to cover here that, I just haven't done a whole lot of videos on so far this summer, but done a lot of coverage over at the site. Have another piece coming today as well for emerging leaders in summer workouts. And so I'll link all of that in the description below as always. Again, if you're looking for a bit more detailed coverage than you would get on these videos, check us out at Hook'emHeadlines.com, link in the description below. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started here. The most important aspect, I think, of this video is talking about some of the true freshmen and the new additions to the program that are standing out. I guess I'll start here with the summer enrollees, just because getting them up to speed is always an important aspect of summer workouts. And then, some of the 7-on-7 stuff, it's just important to get those reps heading into the fall and get those looks as well. So wanted to start off here, I got a few summer enrollees that I wanted to pinpoint, and then I'll cover just some of the spring enrollees that have been standing out. First one is Jelani McDonald, the 4-star athlete. It was a late cycle addition for the Longhorns in the 2023 class out of Waco Connolly High School. McDonald was a big deal to get late in this cycle for the Longhorns. A little bit under-recruited early, early out of high school, but ultimately, I think he's going to be a really solid addition, really versatile piece, extreme athletic upside for Texas on the defensive side of the ball. McDonald has really stood out just from a physical perspective in summer workouts. Obviously, I mentioned the physical upside he brings to the table, so this is really the time of the offseason when he gets to shine. But, he's gotten down to work right away in the weight room. He came in amazing shape from what I heard, just because he was still running track through the end of the spring. And so all told, McDonald looked really sharp when he arrived on campus last month, and has continued to impress since then. Another summer enrollee I wanted to mention here is Warren Roberson, 4-star safety out of Red Oak High School. Roberson is a guy that, again, another late cycle addition, a former TCU commit. I think similar to McDonald, was a guy that I was watching just to make an impact during summer workouts, or at least impress the coaches. But it sounded like he's kind of done that and more. Another similarity between him and McDonald is just the fact that neither one of them are really going to be looked at as immediate impact guys. Roberson, I think, maybe second or third year just because the defensive backfield is so deep, and then McDonald just because he didn't have a specific position that he was recruited at until pretty late in the 2023 cycle, and he's got some technique to refine, some development to do before he's ready to just really make an impact on the field at the collegiate level. But yeah, Roberson, again, another guy that's standing out physically. It showed a good understanding of the defense right away. There was a report from TFB Texas, I believe this was a few weeks ago, that just mentioned Roberson is one of the biggest most pleasant surprises so far during the summer, and that's always nice to hear. Among some of these guys that might have been a little bit more underrated or overlooked among the summer enrollees. Next up among the summer enrollees, and last one I wanted to give a shout out to here, is the highest rated recruit among the summer enrollees for the Longhorns in the 2023 class, Derek Williams. True freshman safety. Williams was one of my favorite commits that Texas got in the 2023 class. Part of a pretty historic recruiting class for Texas at defensive back for the 2023 cycle, just in terms of how highly rated both him and Malik Muhammad, the high four-star corner out of South Oak Cliff High School, were. Williams, I think if there was any guy that you were looking at in the 2023 class among the summer enrollees that was going to be able to make an impact on the field this fall, Williams was the guy. Texas, again, deep at defensive back, but Williams, a guy with a polished game. I mean, just a true playmaker, ball hawk, hard hitter on the back end of the defense. Really just a guy that, looks like an SEC caliber safety. Again, Texas deep at safety right now. Jaron Thompson, Jalen Catalon are the set-in-stone starters heading into fall camp. But you never know. I mean, if injuries pile up, Texas gets some big leads during the non-conference schedule against teams like Rice and Wyoming. That's going to give Williams a chance to get some extra live game reps and really impress on the field. And, if he really just proves to be just too good to keep off the field, then I think as the season moves along, he's going to start getting more and more of those live game reps. Texas is going to want to get him as much run as possible this fall, without taking too much away from other more experienced guys in critical situations. But, Texas is likely losing Jaron Thompson, Jalen Catalon, both next offseason. Then a guy like Williams is going to be kind of the guy that they're passing the torch to. So, bringing this back to center, it's great to hear that, Williams is probably the most impressive of the summer enrollees so far from what we've heard. And, whether it's condition or what some of the conditioning program or in the weight room, even in the film room, Williams is a guy that's impressed so far. So I heard that over and over again in the last couple of months. And then I wanted to touch on some of the early enrollees from Texas's 2023 class that have been standing out so far this summer. First name that I wanted to mention, just because, again, he's been mentioned over and over and over again this offseason, is Jonte Cook. Cook made an immediate splash. I don't know any other way to put it. He looked good during the spring. He's the guy that's going to get reps right away this fall. I think he's kind of in that top 5 group of wide receivers for Texas heading into fall camp. And again, he's continued to look the part of someone that's going to be ready to go from day one this fall. It's hard to not mention him when you see his name popping up this much during the summer. So I had to give him some recognition there. And then actually let me backtrack a little bit. There is one more summer enrollee I wanted to give a shout to. That was Ryan Niblett. I mentioned him in an earlier video that just his speed, I think he clocked in as maybe the second fastest player on the team. I think he was north of 22 miles an hour when Texas was doing all the measurements and physical testing and everything early in summer workouts. And, Niblett, among the early enrollee, or among the true freshmen, new additions, whatever, he definitely was the fastest. And so, he's continued to look good physically. I've heard his name enough to where, I think he's kind of surpassed expectations in a way. Obviously, it's summer workout, so you have to put that, or you have to take that with a grain of salt. But I think Niblett's looked better than advertised. I thought he was going to be more of maybe a 2 or 3 year development guy before he really reaches his ceiling. But maybe he can be more of an early impact guy, especially with how good he's looked so far. And then last of the early enrollees that I wanted to mention is Anthony Hill. Hill, man, I don't know if there's a player that Texas fans are more excited to see among the true freshmen. CJ Baxter is going to be awesome. Jonte Cook, as I mentioned earlier, Derek Williams, Malik Muhammad, all these guys I think are going to be really, really good. But Anthony Hill is the one that we've heard the most about that it sounds like will make the biggest immediate impact, and just a guy that's going to be all over the field for Texas on defense. This summer, again, just really improved his understanding of the defense, shown some different aspects of his game that I think are a little bit more mature than we thought back during the spring and 7-on-7 work. And so all around, Hill just really impressive so far. Now I want to kind of take a look at some of the players that are standing out in 7-on-7 work this summer. Some of these 7-on-7 reps, they're important to get, especially for the skill guys and some of the younger corners and defensive backs, linebackers, guys like that. Just because all these reps matter so much. Again, it's simulated live game action, or not even live game action, no pressure on the quarterback, so you can't take a ton away from it. But again, especially for the younger guys, these reps are pretty valuable to get. First name up that I wanted to mention is A.D. Mitchell. Just a guy that's been all you could ask for and more so far this offseason. I think that Mitchell, it took him, I mentioned this a lot, but it took him a couple of weeks to really find his footing during the spring. But once he did, man, it's just been full go. And, A.D. Mitchell, and then I'll mention more on Worthy here in a little bit, but A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy are the two names among the skill guys that I've seen pop up the most this offseason, especially during the summer in terms of who's impressed. Mitchell, I saw something from Inside Texas the other day where they were saying he was one of the best 5 players for the Longhorns since the spring. Obviously that says a lot considering he's a new addition this offseason. Granted, he's expected to obviously make an immediate impact as the starting boundary wide receiver. So, like I said, nothing but good things there. And then a couple of other guys just that have looked really, really good in this summer in 7-on-7. One I have to give a shout to here is freshman cornerback Malik Muhammad. I mentioned some of the early enrollees a moment ago that have been standing out this summer. I haven't heard a ton about Muhammad just in terms of his progress in summer, in the summer strength and conditioning program, but in 7-on-7, I heard a lot of good stuff in terms of the progress he's made. He's looking more natural just in terms of being able to use his length and physicality in one-on-one coverage, and I think that was one of the biggest strides he had to make, just because. Not necessarily because the jumping competition was going to be big, because he was already playing South Oak Cliff High School, state champion, playing high-level Texas high school football. The jumping competition is not as extreme as some of the other guys in this class. But, for Muhammad, he's facing some really talented wideouts this offseason. Texas is pretty loaded at cornerback, so he had a lot to learn, especially, again, against this level of competition in practice in 7-on-7 this summer. So again, the fact that he's showing this level of maturity, I want to say this level of mental fortitude, because if this guy ever makes a mistake, from what we've heard, he really just does whatever he can to fix it, shows up the next day to practice workouts, whatever, and really just improves his game. And so Muhammad showing maturity well beyond his years. He's improving at a really, really fast rate. That's only continued for 7-on-7 work this summer. And then the last name I wanted to mention for 7v7, I mentioned it a moment ago, is Xavier Worthy. So Worthy is a guy that obviously is going to be one of the most important parts of the team this fall. He's the most productive returning wide receiver for Texas and one of the most productive returning wide receivers in the entire Big 12 this year. But I did a piece on the site today where I talked about he's looking like the best version of himself that he has since he arrived on the 40 a few years ago. He's a guy that, obviously took a step back last season, regressed in pretty much every major statistical category as far as wide receivers are concerned. But he played the second half of last season with a broken hand. Obviously, there's some stats there that line up to what Brennan Marion and Worthy have said about that before. I think Sark mentioned that too during the spring. But, the fact that, Worthy still had a productive season, and that I think a lot of people have defined this as a contract year for him, which it is. The fact that he's really living up to that billing so far is a good sign heading into fall camp, because, again, the expectations are going to be really high for him this year. But I said this earlier in the video, him and A.D. Mitchell have looked like the two best wide receivers, and I would actually say the two best skill guys on offense since the spring. That's only continued for 7v7 work. Worthy is also heard really good things about the work ethic that he's showing in the weight room and film room. So all told, he's progressed a lot this summer, showing a lot too to the coaches. And then in terms of the standouts from summer workouts, I wanted to mention some upperclassmen that have either really just emerged as vocal leaders or are really making an impression on the staff. Some of these guys are new additions to the program. I guess I'll start there. A.D. Mitchell, I mentioned him earlier in the video, but again, a guy that continues to stand out. It's kind of set the tone in the wide receiver room this offseason, along with guys like Worthy and Whittington. And so, he's worth mentioning among the upperclassmen just because he's done so well since he arrived on campus. Another name here, Jalen Ford. Ford, the guy's just bound for a big season. He's looked good. I didn't mention him among the 7-on-7 guys that have looked good, but he has. He's looked like one of the better linebackers there. During the spring, he really emerged as a vocal leader. That has continued to be the case. This summer. And, he was named the Big 12 preseason Defensive Player of the Year last week. I think there's a lot of things building to where Ford, I think, really will be maybe not just one of the best linebackers in the Big 12, but in the entire country this fall. Another name that I wanted to mention is former Minnesota senior defensive lineman Trill Carter, actually the most recent transfer addition for Texas and the last in the 2023 class. Carter really made waves. The first few weeks he was on campus, I heard a lot of things like he just wasn't going to be outworked, that, just the work ethic in the film room, the practice field, strength and conditioning program, all that have really, really impressed. He's made a big impression right away. And any guy that's that won't be outworked among the interior defensive linemen, especially a guy that took as many reps as Carter did, especially run defense at Minnesota. I believe it was over 1,000 defensive snaps in the last 4 seasons. That's a good sign. This is a guy that I think is going to come into fall camp in shape, ready to go. Again, another guy that's really ready to set the tone among the upperclassmen. And then the last name that I have here among the guys that have emerged as just leaders for Texas this summer, JT Sanders. Sanders, we heard a ton about him last offseason, just in terms of how he was looking like a physical freak, someone that was guaranteed to be a breakout player for Texas. That all lined up. He was all Big 12 first team tight end. He's a guy that I think is probably viewed as one of the 3 or 5 best tight ends in the country heading into the 2023 season. And not only has he continued to stand out in the weight room and on the practice field, and really just be a leader by example, but he's a guy really since last fall that has emerged as a vocal leader. I've heard that more and more too in the last 8 or 9 months. And so he's going to be an incredibly important part of this offense, and just the best tight end that Texas has on the team this year. And so, he's obviously going to be a guy that's incredibly important this fall. And then I wanted to wrap up this video by talking about some of the guys that are still pushing for playing time this summer that, maybe if they're a little bit overlooked, or, most people might just think, okay, this is the way the depth chart's going to look heading into the fall. These are still some guys that are kind of fighting for positioning, and before the depth chart really starts to come to fruition a couple of weeks into fall camp. These are guys that need to make a big impression, and some of these guys have stood out. But first name up is junior defensive lineman Vernon Broughton. I actually think that Broughton is almost the exact guy here that kind of defines players that really just need to do everything they can this summer and in fall camp to just blow Bo Davis, Pete Kwiatkowski, his Texas coaching staff away heading into the season, because Broughton, unfortunately, he hasn't gotten to where he needs to be physically. The development in his game, he was an extremely highly touted guy coming out of high school that signed with Texas in the 2020 class, a high 4-star, but just hasn't lived up to the hype so far. He's shown flashes here and there as a pass rusher. A guy that's definitely quick enough, has good enough hands to, drum up some pressure from the interior. But other than that, he's been able to be moved off the football pretty easily. He's not a very effective run defender. Pad level technique is needed work. And, just overall in run defense, he has not been a force out of the 3-tech, or definitely not at nose. So, this summer, not only does he need to finally add some muscle mass, kind of even out his frame, but he needs to make sure that he's getting down to work in the film room, covering his gaps better, not getting moved off the football as much, working on that technique. A lot of strides he needs to make, because if he doesn't, he's going to get passed up in the rotation, I think, for good. I haven't heard his name come up a whole lot this summer, here and there. I don't know if that's necessarily cause for concern, but like I said, he's just a guy that heading into the fall, he's probably the 5th or 6th guy in the rotation right now, because ahead of him you got guys like Alfred Collins, Byron Murphy, Tavondre Sweat. I would even say Trill Carter's probably ahead of him right now. And then I don't think it would take, if Sadir Mitchell ends up having a big fall camp and shows out in the reps he does get early in the season, I don't doubt that Mitchell could pass him up in the rotation too. He's looked like an immediate impact guy since Texas signed him in the 2023 class. Again, for Broughton, this is a really, really important year so that he doesn't get passed up on the depth chart for good. Next guy up, and I actually think this player is in a better spot than Broughton heading into the fall, just in terms of his positioning on the depth chart. That's senior linebacker David Benda. Benda had a huge spring camp. He was one of the breakouts for Texas this spring. But he's really kind of found his way, I think, since last fall. He started taking more reps at will linebacker, and just started to rely more on his physical gifts, and let the rest of his game do the talking, and that's paid off for him so far. Again, looked good during the spring. So far this summer, he's a guy that we've heard mostly positive things from, and overall, I think he's kind of continued that momentum that he found during the spring. I'd say right now he's still projected to be the starting will linebacker, but he's still got a lot to prove. Texas has some freshmen that are going to be chomping at the bit to get more reps at linebacker this fall, and then you can't forget about Mo Blackwell. That's another guy that could be pushing Benda for reps at the will linebacker position. Blackwell's another guy that you got to kind of watch him during the summer because he still needs to add some weight, but I think in terms of prove it time, Blackwell's still a guy that I think is kind of on the rise, whereas Benda, this is his 5th, 6th year on campus. This is it. I think this is his last year of eligibility. So there's time for him to get it done. Now is the time. And then last name up among some of the players that this guy's not an upperclassman, but that I think is important to watch for playing time purposes is Xavion Bryce, redshirt freshman defensive back. Bryce, he got some reps last fall. I think it was maybe a half dozen to a dozen over the course of 2 games. I think he got some reps late against Kansas and UL Monroe. But Bryce, he was one of the lower rated recruits for Texas in the 2022 class, late flip, I believe, from OU. And someone that made some noise last offseason. Did pretty well during the spring. I've seen some depth charts that have him, potentially pushing for a spot on the 2 deep. The reason why I wanted to mention Bryce here is because Texas has so much defensive back depth on the roster, this year. And then if you're looking forward, Texas already has Santana Wilson and Jordan Johnson-Rebel, 2 4-star defensive backs committed in the 2024 class, Wilson being a cornerback, which Bryce is getting reps at right now. Ultimately, he could be moved around because he was recruited as an athlete, but cornerback is his position for now, and I think what he's trying to grow into. I think Bryce could also play at safety. He's taken reps there at times in the last 2 off seasons, but again, right now corner is where he's taken most of his practice reps, and it looks like it's where he'll be heading into the fall. So again, just another guy to watch here. But anyway, that pretty much does it for this video. Like I've said multiple times, wanted to get y'all some updates for summer workouts so far, where a lot of important guys for Texas, especially among the underclassmen. Some of the new additions to the program stand as we're a little less than a month out from the start of fall camp. So anyway, for Andrew Miller, Hook'emHeadlines.com, that's pretty much it. Hook 'em.